Hello there guys, RMP792 here. So we are up to Star Trek Discovery Season 2 Episode 9, I think. You know, if I was more professional I'd actually double check these things before. Yes, Episode 9, Project Daedalus. So, this was a pretty good episode with some glaring problems. First things first, yes, finally. You know, I've been asking for this for a season and a half, but they finally gave the minor characters a bit of character. They've been better at it this season than they were last season, significantly so. But it felt like the minor characters were actually quite important in this one. You know, the obvious important one being Lieutenant Commander Airiam. Was it Lieutenant Commander, I think? Also... Detmer and Lieutenant Detmer, the redhead with the cybernetic prosthesis there, and yeah, it was really, really nice seeing these two relatively minor characters get a chance to have a bit more interesting stuff to do than just punch buttons on the bridge and say yes sir. That I really, really liked. Of course, they've now gone and killed Airiam. You dicks. So yeah, so the only time one of them gets to have interest and character development and some genuine ooh, this is interesting moments is when they kill them. You dicks. But oh well. So the interesting thing about this episode is I've been assuming up to this point that Airiam was an alien. I was assuming she was a species like the Binars, which have widespread cybernetic modification, and I was assuming that the paneling was effectively what her skin color is. Apparently, it's not. Apparently, she's been human the whole time. Because the episode includes a. You get the impression she effectively downloads her memories because she can't remember them all, but she wants and so she archives the important ones and deletes the unimportant ones. So, we see her sort of walking through a corridor and she's like, yeah, I can delete that. Or she's having a conversation with Tilly and Detmer and can't remember the other, the navigator's name. Again, more characterization for these people, please. Part of the reason I can remember Airiam's name now is they said it quite a lot in this episode. But yeah, so and it's a little scene of the three of them just talking and having fun, and Detmer basically saying, yeah, she's not playing Cardascart, which, if you're not aware, is a game that turns up in Voyager. We've never got any indication of how it's actually played, only that it's got it involves sort of coloured shapes on a grid. Yeah, because Seven of Nine and Neelix play it quite a bit. She also plays it with Naomi Wildman. So it's obviously meant to be a relatively child-friendly game, but again, just because a game is child-friendly doesn't mean there aren't complexities that an adult could appreciate. I mean, let's face it, you can teach chess to a child, and yet you've got chess grandmasters. So I'm not disparaging Cardascart in any way. Again, we know basically nothing about it. But it's just the four of them talking, and it's a nice, cute, humanizing moment, and it's very interesting the fact that that's a memory that the cybernetic being thinks is absolutely worth saving and cherishing. Or even there's a moment when she's just with Michael and they're looking at something very pretty out the viewport, and they both sort of smile at each other, and again she decides that's worth saving because that's an important moment of human interaction. And I think that's a very interesting look into Airiam's psyche. It's very much about what she thinks is important. So as I say, walking down a corridor, something like that, no, who cares? Something important relating to a job, obviously. But it's very human to want to hang on to those personal moments above everything else. Right down to the fact that, she clearly keeps rewatching the footage of her and her husband, because they flat state that they've just eloped and just got married. And you get the impression that's probably the last time they were happy, because, they mention some sort of shuttle accident. So I suspect he was killed and she was so badly injured that they had to implement a lot of cybernetics in order to keep her alive. and that's how she ended up looking the way she does. As I said, I've been assuming up to this point that she was an alien. So that's actually really interesting, and they could have gone some very interesting places with that. And now she's dead. That's going to feel like a waste. That really is. I'm hoping the reason that happened is that the actress, for whatever reason, wanted out of the show. Maybe the prosthetics were just not gelling with her, or maybe she's got an offer to go do a bigger part on something else, or she wanted to go back to theatre or whatever, rather than just the writers wanted to kill someone off for shock value. I'm hoping that's the case, because Star Trek is not Game of Thrones. Game of Thrones is a show where every actor going in knows they could well be on borrowed time, whereas Star Trek is a show that works best when it develops a large cast of characters. In even minor ones, people like Reg Barclay on TNG. You realise he's only in about half a dozen episodes, but you know so much about Reg just based on his limited, appearances. Same goes for a half dozen characters on Voyager, or a legion of characters on DS9. You know a lot about them in spite of them only appearing relatively few times, because they are characterized so well. And that's one thing Discovery's just not been great at with its secondary supporting cast. And this episode was a great step in the right direction for that. I want to see more of this kind of stuff, just without the and now they're dead bit at the end. Right down to again, there's little moments in this like her saying oh, that's the advantage of being a cyborg. Cyborg, and Detmer just pops up with like, yeah, cyborgs, woo. Because again, she's got that cybernetic implant over around her eye, which that's clearly there for some medical reason. She didn't just get that for the hell of it, because she doesn't have it on the Xinjiao. Then I'm assuming somewhere along the way in the war she gets injured. Could well have been in that initial fight. I can't remember if we see her get hurt there. But yeah, and then they've obviously had to put that on her in order to probably keep her alive. But as I say, again, this does raise the ongoing continuity problem in that cybernetics are just not very common by the TNG era. And we don't really see them at all in the TOS era, because they didn't have the budget for them. Now, again, there are two distinct possibilities with this. Number one, their medical technology has advanced so that they can regrow stuff, so they don't have to rely on replacing, they can repair, if that makes sense. So if your hand gets cut off, they have the technology to eventually grow you a new one, rather than you having to get a cyborg hand. Or the other possibility actually relates to the end of this episode, and so I'll talk about that when I get on. But yeah, those were the bits of this episode that I really liked, the human moments between the secondary characters. And those were the really good bits of this episode. The rest of the episode was split between the ongoing Michael and Spock can't stand each other subplot, or Michael's trying to reach out and Spock's still really pissed with her. And frustrated with himself for not being able to figure out what the hell is going on with the Red Angel. And the other plot is they're going to Section 31 super secret, ex-space prison headquarters. So I'll talk about the Spock subplot first, because it's it's less main plot of the episode and more minor. Yeah, I didn't like this particular subplot. I appreciate this is still younger Spock, so he's not as clamped down as and comfortable with who and what he is as he is by the TOS era. Because again, that's the best part of 10 years from now. In fact, put it this way, I checked the timeline, and the menagerie when Pike gets wounded is about 10 years from this current point. So you're probably looking at about 9-ish 8 or 9 years from when Kirk takes over the Enterprise. So yes, this is relatively early in Pike's second 5-year mission, in case you're curious. But yes, so that is very much, so as I said, we are dealing with a younger Spock who he hasn't quite figured out who and what he is yet. And she very much gets under his skin because they have a lot of personal backstory and baggage, and I still don't give a toss. I'm sorry. The problem is, it's not that the actors are doing a bad job. The actors are doing a good job. It's not even that the script is bad. I just still maintain the idea of her being his adoptive sister doesn't work. It was a fundamentally flawed idea from the beginning, and I don't think there is a way to undo it. Again, if I'd been, in a significant place of power at CBS during, while they were working out the initial concept for the show, I would have vetoed the idea. And I would have basically said, you wanted to have a connection to Spock, that's absolutely fine, but adoptive sister he's never mentioned before is the wrong way to go about it. What I would have had her be is, pretty much his only human friend when he was growing up. Because, she was one of the few humans on Vulcan. So have her be adopted by, somebody Sarek knows and was good friends with. Because Sarek was a very popular Vulcan. He knew a lot of people. And it's entirely possible that, that one of them had very similar views on the Idic to him. Because, if you're not aware, the Idic is a Vulcan philosophy, or the Idic technically is a symbol which is often put into a sort of necklace or brooch or anything like that. And what it represents is infinite diversity in infinite combination. The idea that more, and that brings, makes things better, makes things more beautiful, makes things more complete. And that's a value that Sarek definitely holds to, which is why he believes so strongly in the principles of the Federation, in bringing species together in unity, and and combining in infinite, combining their diversity in infinite combination to create something new and wondrous. And again, the mere fact that he married Amanda and had a half-human child shows a version of that philosophy. That is combining two things in a way that, as Spock says in this episode, half human, half Vulcan children are not unheard of. He's not unique, but they are quite rare, or they're very rare at this point in the timeline. There's an interesting bit in Enterprise where they actually get a hold of a sample of DNA from Daniels, who's a character who turns up a few times in Enterprise, who's a temporal agent from the future. And at one point, they actually, they're examining him from a medical viewpoint because he's been quite badly wounded. And they get a look at his DNA, and Phlox, his comment is, well, this bit's human. That bit ain't. What his comment is, there's at least 3 species in there he recognises, one of which is Vulcan, and at least another half dozen he doesn't. Daniels is the product of generations of interbreeding between various alien species. And while he looks human because, he's mostly human, he has got unique, traits in his DNA that do not come from this world. And while the science of that is complete, cobblers, you can't really do that. It's a fabulous idea that's very much a metaphor for the melding of cultures. And so yeah, that's where I see that coming from. I've got completely off topic, but yeah. So yeah, I still dislike the idea of her being his adopted sister that he's never mentioned before, but can't change it now. Got to live with it. So yeah. So what's going on here is they play a bit of 3D chess, and he's clearly trying to lose because he just wants her to piss off. And he's still kind of miffed with her, and yeah, they eventually, he eventually loses his temper with her, breaks the 3-dimensional chessboard and buggers off. And yeah, that's the main focus of their little subplot for this episode, because as I say, it's the ongoing, are they going to fix their relationship thing? And I kind of feel like if he's going to keep not talking about her for the next, 20, 30, entire rest of his life, she's either going to have to be dead, or they're just not going to patch this relationship up brilliantly. Some things just can't be fixed. Which is sad, but very true. But I feel like that's not going to be the route they're going to take. They are going to come to some sort of mutual understanding, and it's the weakest aspect of this subplot. I don't really care about Spock's interactions with Michael. I'd much rather see him interacting with everybody else. So the bit where he's in engineering with Stamets and they're having a bit of a conversation, and that's actually much more interesting to me. Seeing where Spock's coming from in that regard, in that he's trying to figure out why, of billions of life forms across the galaxy, why the Red Angel went to him specifically. And if the answer turns out that it's goddamn Michael in that suit, I'm going to be annoyed. Again, there are so many things you can do with the mystery of who is in that suit, and I'm just hoping they don't go with the most obvious and worst solution. I'm still largely convinced it's going to end up being Michael, even though I don't want it to be. So, yeah, but that's a nice little scene. But, yeah, that's sort of all that's going on with that subplot for this episode. And weakest bit of the episode, largely because I just don't care about that relationship. But, yeah, the rest of the episode is, as I say, is sort of an action-y plot, a little bit. Because, they're going to Section 31's secret base because Admiral Cornwall's turned up. And I love the fact it's we're fugitives now. Hi, Admiral, do you want to come on board? So, yeah. I mean, to be fair, she clearly doesn't give a toss about rules and regulations, but... Yeah, so she joins them and she basically says, well, Section 31's got this advanced computer called Control, which, we feed it all of our information, and it gives us, it suggests possible motions and what it thinks we should do, and we take those into account, but we make the ultimate decision. And one of the admirals in charge of Section 31 has basically been rooting for them to hand all their strategic strategic planning over to this computer just in its entirety. And part of my problem with this plot line, again, is a timeline issue. Because at the moment, we are about 12 years before the Ultimate Computer, which is a TOS episode where Starfleet has developed the Ultimate Computer, the M5, which is basically meant to be capable of running a starship entirely on its own. And it does what computers do, AIs do, it goes crazy and attempts to take over the Enterprise, and they have to stop it and all that usual stuff. Which implies that this is a fair bit prior to that. Now, granted, I'm willing to let them get away with it on the grounds that the M5 is about yay big. You can't see my hands, but yay big and about as tall as I am. In fact, no, I don't think it's even that tall. It's probably about 5 foot tall by about 2 foot 2 foot across and vaguely square. So if you assume that Control is, say, taking up a couple of floors of that starbase, then I'm willing to let them get away with that. So it's a lot bulkier, but with more processing power. Again, in the same way that a modern server farm has at least as much kick as a PC from 20 years from now. Same basic principle. So as long as we don't eventually find it and it's like the size of a tablet, I'm kind of okay with them going this route. But we'll have to see what they do with it and whether or not I'm going to be bitching about the continuity again. So yeah, and what they turn up and there's basically a giant ass minefield around it, and they give some high and mighty speech about how Starfleet doesn't use mines. Would you people please watch Deep Space Nine? I mean, I appreciate that was pretty dire situation, and Rom was the one who thought of using mines. Nobody else did, which implies they're not exactly in common use in the Federation. But they were a bit high horsey about it. Which, yeah, I mean, it's Star Trek. I shouldn't really be surprised at that, but yeah. And then they had the stupidest mines in existence. They really did. A lot of those mines were kind of dumb. So the comment is, well, we've got to go in with our shields down because the mines are attracted to them. So they stealthily go in with their shields down, and then several of the mines start vectoring towards them because they're being directly controlled by the computer, by control. And throughout this, Commander Arium has been trying to hack into some data and keeps stealthily doing stuff she's not supposed to be doing without even really consciously realizing it. Because again, the thing that infected her earlier keeps taking her over and trying to access the relevant data. And yeah, so they go in and then things start going to hell, and they. As I say, the mines are really weird in this episode because they've got giant spinny death blades on them. To which my response is, have you guys never heard of a bomb? Because bombs still work in space. I mean, yeah, you've got to actually hit the thing, but you've got to hit the thing with a giant spinny death blade as well. So, yeah. And when they were flying into the minefield, I was like, I'm going to make so many Galaxy Quest references. So yeah, when they were starting to get slammed into, I was just like, can you try not to hit every single one of them? And I can't exactly do it with Alan Rickman's gravitas, but yeah. So they raise the shields and and more mines smash into them, and then there's sensor blocking mines that make them think that their helm isn't working properly and stuff like that. That's an interesting idea. That makes a lot more sense than the spinny death blades. And then a few more smash into them and actually explode. So, yay. But yeah, so they're trying to get through the minefield with limited success. And eventually the mines suddenly stop and they get contacted by the aforementioned Vulcan Admiral, who basically says, surrender now. And they eventually beam over. Or they beam over a small team because they're able to detect that there's no life support except in the central bits. They beam over in EVA suits. And the team consists of Arium, Michael, and the new security chief. And there's a bit slightly early in the episode where Arium asks, or confirms that the things that she's got there are some sort of implant that let her breathe, what we would consider normal air. Presumably her species breathes something else. Or similar things in different quantities or something like that, which is fair enough. Again, I like to see some diversity of species in Star Trek. That's not just all humans with silly things glued to their foreheads. So I get flashbacks to Voyager's Tac, which just have the silliest design imaginable because they've got a thing that comes down here and goes all the way down here, and yet they've got a mouth. And it's like. So, you wouldn't evolve that. That's just silly. But oh well. But yeah, so they've had their engines disabled, so they're sort of desperately trying to get the spore drive working again, which they think Michael sabotaged, but actually Arium did, and or I'm assuming she did. It's not explicitly stated, but it's heavily implied, is what I would say. So. They beam over and, air's down, life support's down, gravity's down, everything's down. And then they eventually find some bodies. And one of the bodies, I took one look at it from the back and was like, that's the Vulcan Admiral, isn't it? And, it was the hairstyle again, the way for the record. I'm not, psychic or anything like that. But, and then Michael turns her over and is horrified to realise, yes, it's the Vulcan Admiral and she's been dead for at least 2 weeks. So who the hell was talking to us? And... yeah, it's a hologram that they've been talking to a fake, and Saru's able to use that to analyze the footage of Spock murdering all those people to agree, yeah, this is fake too. This footage the footage is real, however, it was created by recording holograms. it's similar to the way in the Pale Moonlight that they create a forgery of a Dominion meeting, in order to where they discuss the invasion of Romulus in order to con the Romulans into joining the war. Side note: In the Pale Moonlight is one of the best episodes of DS9, bar none. I'm not exactly stating a controversial opinion there. It's a great episode. But anyway, so they figured out Spock is definitively innocent, which they were like 90% certain of already. But now they have the proof that the video footage was faked. All right. Early morning. But yeah, so they have that, the proof now. And they realised that what Airiam's been doing is downloading all of the data from the sphere, or that the mysterious thing they encountered a few episodes ago, all the data that it has on AI. Because what Control wants to do is turn itself into a fully fledged AI, and that would be and having all the information on every other AI it's ever seen would be the jumpstart on that. And they basically realised that Control is the threat they've seen. If they continue on their current path, it becomes a fully fledged AI, and it wipes and it goes full Cylon on us, or full Reaper on us, or 100 other things involving AI, and just wipes everybody the hell out. And the Red Angel's traveling back in time in order to try and prevent that. So yeah, that's what's going on there. And earlier I said that they imply that what are the other reasons behind the potential less reduction in cybernetics in the future is that this is the reason. And a psycho AI almost ends up is able to control anybody with significant cybernetic implants. So they basically go, oh no, we are not using these things for the time being. Not until we can get a clamp. Not unless we can prevent that happening again. Which makes a certain amount of sense. So I suspect they're going to go one of those two ways. Because again, there's been a lot of minor course correcting in this season. After they got flack last season over the continuity cock-ups, they've been doing course correcting to try and get back towards making it make sense. So you've got Pike basically saying that the reason that the Enterprise futzed up was because of the hologram. So he basically says, "Yep, take the whole damn system out. We don't need it. I'll just use a damn view screen like I prefer to do anyway." Which implies that that the technology's got enough problems that they might stop it being standard now and just go back to view screens until they can get it working properly again, and that takes until DS9. And again, even in DS9, they only use it for a little bit before going back to view screens anyway, so view screens better. You don't need to have somebody holographically projecting themselves to stand beside you when you can just talk to them on the other end of a screen. Certainly for Starship communication, enough is enough. But yeah, so I wouldn't be surprised if that's where they're going with that. And and Airiam basically, pulls one of the breathing things out of the security chief's face, and that's gotta hurt because I'm assuming they're pretty well implanted. So she sort of can barely breathe. And then gets into an extended fight with Michael, and it's a bit silly that the security chief goes down so fast. However, you could argue that being an AI, or being well on its way to being an AI, and a computer specifically designed for threat assessment, it basically decided security chief more significant threat, take her out with a surprise attack, and then you should be able to overpower the baseline human with less training, or I'm assuming less training anyway. So there is a certain amount of logic to it, and I'm going to let them get away with it, even though Michael getting into the fisticuffs with the cyborg it feels like she should have got her ass kicked a lot more definitively than she did. Because she did eventually manage to get the phaser rifle and shoot her with the stun setting a few times, which didn't do that much. but she managed to sort of force her back into the airlock and seal it. And obviously she was going to bust her way out eventually, and Tilly was able to get through to Ariam by uploading, as she said, a bunch of her memories. So again, that conversation they were having earlier, and that the personal human connection that they have, and that was enough to override Ariam temporarily in order to basically let her to make her say, "Kill me." To say the only way you're going to save yourself in this situation is to blow her out the airlock. And the actual scene works really quite well. It really does give that noble sacrifice vibe. And again, if Ariam and her relationship to the others had been established a bit more up to this point, it would have had a lot more emotional impact. The second I realised they were going to do that, I was annoyed, because it felt fairly cheap in that they'd only bothered to characterise her in an attempt to make you feel bad about her death, not because she was actually an important character. So the scene itself works fine. It needed more build-up throughout the rest of the show. So if this had been one of the minor DS9 characters or one of the minor TOS characters who turned up a few times, like hell, if this had been Nurse Ogawa, I would have felt worse about it than I did here, because again, Nurse Ogawa was a relatively minor TNG character. She mostly just hung around sickbay, just doing her job, being a nurse, and helping Dr. Crusher with whatever medical stuff was going on. Sorry, this hand got very, very gesticulaty for a second there. But she had an established character and personality, and I would have felt worse if it had been her in that situation than Lieutenant Commander Ariam, who's just not had enough development up to this point. And again, that's not the fault of the actress in any way. The actress is really going for it in this scene. And on its own, the scene works. It just needed more lead up to it. Beyond just this one episode. So I'm hoping in the future we can get more stuff for the secondary cast to do. More of those little human moments, because I like those little human moments. They're often the most interesting stuff. Again, to go back to Mass Effect, for example, the moments I remember from those games, more often than not, are the small interactions with the members of my crew. Like the bit where you find out Morden used to sing Gilbert and Sullivan. That's a great little moment that is completely irrelevant to the main plot, but tells you interesting things about him as a character. And as I say, the opening scene where she's saving her memories and you see what's important to her, that I really liked. So, yeah, and right at the end, right before she gets blown out the airlock, she, because Michael can't bring herself to push the big button, pull the big lever, whatever, to blow her out into space. She mentions a Project Daedalus, and then she gets blown out the airlock. And my initial thought was that was actually the control AI killing her before she gave away important information. So Project Daedalus, whatever the hell it is obviously important in some way. Is it pronounced Daedalus or Daedalus? I've always thought it was Daedalus, but in Stargate Atlantis, the ship is the Daedalus. So I don't know. If you're not aware, Daedalus is a character from Greek mythology. He was the father of Icarus. So Daedalus was actually the one who fashioned the wings out of feathers and wax that enabled him and his son Icarus to fly. But Icarus got too cocky, flew too high, flew too close to the sun, the wax melted, the wings fell apart, and he died. But Daedalus did survive the flight, did survive his son, because he knew where his limitations lie and didn't try and push beyond them. So I'm curious to see what the hell Project Daedalus is. Could be anything, but it's probably not good. But yeah, it transpires that it was actually the security chief who sort of managed to get at least one of her implants working enough that she can sort of breathe with great difficulty, and stumble over and pull the big blow them out the goddamn airlock button. And the final shot of the episode is basically Airiam drifting out in space with, the memory that we saw at the beginning of her and her husband, being replayed for her one last time, which Tilly deliberately did, so that she could die watching her happiest memory. And yeah, it's a good episode with things that hold it back. And weirdly, see, as I said, I'm still not a fan of the Spock-Michael dynamic. I'd much rather see Spock interacting with everybody else. I'd love to see more Spock and Pike, to be fair. I want to see the relationship that means that later Spock is willing to risk his career, potentially his life, in order to not even save his captain's life, but save his captain, or give his captain as close to a happy ending as he's going to get, given the injuries he sustains. I want to see that relationship established a bit more. So, yeah, less Spock and Michael, more Spock and everybody else, please. And for the love of God, can you please give him a shave? Spock does not suit a beard. You joked about this last episode. I assumed he was going to take the opportunity to actually, shave and clean himself up. Or is that going to be that's going to be a reveal at the end of the season, isn't it? When he and Pike go back to the Enterprise, and he's now in the proper Starfleet unit. He's in the blue uniform and just had a shave and everything else. That you're saving it for then, aren't you? You scumbags. Anyway, but yeah, so it was a good episode overall. But I would have liked to see more establishment of the secondary cast prior to this to really push it into being a great episode. And that's... Again, I appreciate that's... It's... This episode would have been better if it had been set up more by previous episodes. Isn't the fault of the episode in of itself? It's kind of a weird one. So I think fundamentally that's all I've got on episode 9 Daedalus. Next week, we have episode 10, The Red Angel. So that's hopefully going to be interesting. We might actually find out who's in the damn suit. And if it's Michael, I'm going to be annoyed. So, yeah. Until then, thank you very much for watching, and I will see you in future vlogs.